I would swallow my pride, I would jump on the ride, but the lack thereof would leave me empty inside. Swallow my doubt, leave me inside, I'll find nothing but faith in nothing. Wanna put my tender heart in a blender, watch it spin round to a beautiful oblivion. Rendezvous, then I'm through with you. The song's so emo. Good golly. So howdy everybody, how's everybody doing today? Hope everybody is doing fine. Hope everybody's having a lovely time whenever you're watching this. I would like to start our episode off here reminding people that strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and then weak men turn around and create hard times. But it's very interesting that people think that, hyper-aggressive bullies, not the intellectual types that will try and set you up with a challenge, like the drill sergeant types, but just straight up mindless bullies that get off on a faux sense of dominating other people. Those are actually the weak men creating the hard times. They grew up in such a state where they were not bullied early and often, and instead of having an accurate view of what bullying is, they actually have an artificial view of alpha, beta, gamma, sigma, domination, some crap from some bunk scientist who was studying wolves one time. It applies in some aspects, but even historically, it never was consistently applied across the board to any population of people. So, the people, the individuals, mostly men, that are going around the country, they tour around the country, they go from place to place, police fraternities invite them in, and they groom young police officers into killing at the drop of a hat and being super paranoid, and they play horrible videos with horrible sound in order to terrorize the new police recruits and make them distrustful and hateful and spiteful and paranoid and dissociated from their community that they're supposed to be protecting, that they're supposed to serve and protect. And those individuals that run those programs, you can look them up, police training programs, are very likely more paranoid than any slave owner ever could be, because of the amount of enemies that they are creating in turn, because of the people they're training creating tons of enemies and then having to hide away. Well, anybody who's intelligent, who's coordinating people, would naturally seek the highest level in order to effectively strike the heart of the Hydra instead of cutting off one of its heads. And they would be ultimately a huge responsible point. They would be like the CEOs, and the shareholders would be police fraternities and other horrible, horrible, horrible entities, lodges, and groups like that. It is what it is. I go over this a lot, how when you separate yourself for whatever reason, whether you think that it's for glory or honor or the preservation of your seed, you create so many problems down the road that the only logical and sane way of operating in such a way is hedonically, is gambling, is pursuing prostitution like a lot of the sex tourists who run these organizations do, and, being miserable in between your bouts of your bursts of chasing that dragon. Things got really bad around the world when the leaders of nations stopped dying in battle. It was actually a very, very good thing in the long run, even though it was very, very tragic and killed a lot of good men. And in that turn, replaced those good men with bad men in that instance. Though still, the long-term consequences of it were good. And I think it's important to remember what makes a good leader, which is to say bravery, a little bit of luck, and the combination of the tactics to edge your luck up to the maximum, to not have your bravery turn into stupidity. Those tactics make a good leader, and those tactics applied to a nation make a good nation. And if we allow ourselves to not do the Kobayashi Maru on our captains, well, our vessels are going to end up getting sunk, and that's that. So that's my suggestion, is Study tactics. Be prepared to shed blood. Your own blood especially. Before anybody else's, be prepared to shed your own blood. Meditate on the Bushido path. Meditate on your own demise. Meditate yourself being riddled with arrows. Meditate yourself being run through with a spear. Meditate yourself being mutilated by a sword. Meditate on that for a period of time that is appropriate, and then drop it and do the sort of Zen, drink some tea, clear your mind, enjoy nice nature. That balances that out in methodology. Strongly suggest that. Otherwise, the best possibility that could ever happen to you in your life is to turn into Kissinger. That's the best possibility, which is to say Hitler, if he won, times 4 in the amount of lives killed, and got to live to a long age, and, got to continue to pretend like he was a diplomat even into his hundreds. That's the best you can really hope for, and that's a lot of luck involved in that. Kissinger was also part of the old guard who made a lot better decisions than this new guard. These new guards who will not be reaping very good benefits in the long term because they're too busy in cashing out their instantaneous gratification, getting that lump sum for their long-term payouts. That is not going to be good for their country in the long term and their genealogy that they think that they're protecting. It's not going to be good. The hippies in America in the 70s actually had the right idea when it came to homesteading, when it came to peace as a starter and war as a non-starter, and when it came to expanding your consciousness beyond that of a simple nationality to the point where you view yourself as the international citizen that you are becoming. To close yourself off whilst your armies are all over the world is to ignore the bad things that are happening. And Jimmy Carter, he really tried. He really, really tried to synthesize things, to synthesize this old American from 200 years ago plus culture, Southern Baptist sort of culture, and to synthesize it with the role America was forced to take after we intervened in World War II. That is ultimately why we are now global shepherds, is because we have been portrayed in all of the media and textbooks, history books around the world as shepherds. And, those books being written a certain way and not being updated as people come to a consensus that is different from the history is exactly how Prussia instituted the public school system to create 1 million soldiers, because they were teaching them the theosophical and anthroposophical definition of history deemed best fit for that particular time for that set of people. So they would min-max their military, and they wouldn't invest in anything like, to put it bluntly, all their courses, humanities and art, all of them, from Flight of the Valkyries over to what's considered noble and just in war, it all bled into their ability to wage war with total abandon. And that did not work out very well for Germany, I will say. I went over that a lot in the last episode. And though the Brandenburg Gate still stands, that big old statue, it is painted over by the entire world's cultures. It is no longer considered German. And I'm not very heavily German. I'm only about 20% or so German. But it still feels bad to see an entire nation be divided, conquered, destroyed, turned into a factory for the world's worst things, and producing some of the most mentally damaged and fearful and brainwashed people that have ever existed on this planet. It's very sad. And I hate to get on sad themes repeatedly, especially, I'm recording this around Christmas. I should stay positive, But going over all these things, it will eventually wander into certain things that's just not so pleasant. And I just implore anybody to take their realizations of the world and balance them with love of the world, with love of their fellow human being. You know, my neighbor is very annoying. He's got the rice rockets, he's got a bunch of rams he likes to idle, but I love him anyways, because he's my neighbor, and Christ has commanded me to love my neighbor. And I feel a lot better not going, growling at the guy, and instead going, oh, there goes my neighbor, you know? So, keep that in mind. Behavioral sinks like the Rat Utopia experiment explain a lot about cities. And it's very unfortunate, but you can just go ahead and watch Down the Rabbit Hole Rat Utopia experiment video on YouTube, and that'll complete all of this summary. But the summary is such that when you give any creature anything that they want, and the psychology is pretty clear on this, they will immediately start destroying stuff, messing stuff up, hurting themselves and hurting others, just so that they can have some sort of struggle. And that's in the theme of today's episode. You should embrace struggle, but you should make sure that it is the most effective for your long-term success and the success of others, because a rising tide really does lift all ships. And I don't say that from a selfish perspective. I could die penniless as long as I helped one person take that attitude that could spread to countless other people. You know, that's why I'm doing this. I don't do this for money, but I do want to establish some sort of a show. And eventually, maybe it could be a job, or I could just juggle that in between other things. Either or. Pretty happy the consistency that I've been able to put out, and I hope that I can continue this consistency in the new year. There's some flaming hoops to jump through, but I feel like I'll be able to do it without getting singed too bad. So, stay tuned, guys. All the current stuff in the Middle East you see in Syria and Yemen, that's all Obama's fault. And people go, what about Bush? Yes, Bush inked the Patriot Act. It was a really, really bad act that allowed Obama to invade any country he wanted without congressional approval, which recently sunset. Thank God. He invaded, and I've been saying this for a decade, since I got involved in politics in 2014 after watching our Air Force obliterate a portion of Gaza in Operation Protective Edge, killing 14.5 thousand people. Obama invaded Syria, Obama invaded Libya, Obama invaded Yemen, and Obama invaded Somalia. And he increased drone strikes in Pakistan, and increased drone strikes by over 300%. That is definitely not the sort of thing that a peacemaker does. And yet, he got lauded as the pacifist by the other side. And that allowed a horrible ratcheting of our Overton window to the complete and utter devastation that you see today. And I really hope you pull back from that, because don't ever think that any of the people that you see in the Middle East getting killed can be you tomorrow. It could be. That's what those weapons are for. And they don't discriminate based on things like that. Especially in the age of computers. Trust me. You know, the black-rimmed iconoclasts from the Netherlands. You know, those Dutch Calvinists that became, like, obsessed with tearing down stained glass, which is bad. Like, come on, the stained glass was beautiful. And then smashing the statues and ripping up paintings and stuff so that they could have very, very simple representations of their faith that is non-materialistic and non-idol worshipping. That's essentially the reasoning behind it. But what it ended up resembling was Islam. You know, you went backwards. You went backwards to a time that was afraid of things like free women, was afraid of things like artistic beauty, was afraid of things like beauty. That is very, very sad, and that really, really hurt the Flanders, Hollandaise, Walloon, Liège, all the wonderful, the Limburger, all the wonderful Luxembourger, all those wonderful little countries throughout the Netherlands. It really hurt them. It destroyed a lot of beauty. And that's wrong, you know. I love stained glass. And I hope we can make more stained glass, because that, especially when you have light shining through it, and it's good for your skin, it's awesome, you know. I thought it was funny when I heard that Crystal Coke was a thing. that the really good product that I, as a millennial, know of called Crystal Pepsi was apparently like intercepted by a psyop where Coca-Cola, a horrible company that makes disgusting, soda, which Pepsi's not much better. Pepsi was trying to make a colorless, because the caramel color has actually been implicated in cancer, and tasty clear drink that's like Sprite. They made Crystal Pepsi, and it was pretty dang good. But then Coke released this nasty tasting, disgusting tasting Ditto product that, pardon me, that caused people to associate the first sip of a Crystal Pepsi, a Crystal soda, with horrible taste, and went back to drinking regular, nasty, cancer-giving Coca-Cola. Teeth dissolving, bone dissolving Coca-Cola. Just look up a YouTube video, bones dissolving in cola, in Coke, and you'll find out exactly what I'm talking about. When I was a little kid, I had fun learning really, really long words like anti-disestablishmentarianism, but I also carried around a word called flossy-nosy-hapilification. I can't for the life of me remember where I got that word. That isn't a real word, I'm pretty sure. And I would just go around saying, no, I actually got a longer word than anti-disestablishmentarianism. It's flossy-nosy-hapilification. I was a silly little kid. So now that we're going into 2025, I think it's safe to say that the Let's Go Brandon guys, the Brandoneers, the Brandsters, they can rest now. Your job is complete. Soldier, come home. It's time to retire. They did the early warning system. They let people know that things were way out of hand. And you know what? They were right. They were right. But it's time that we all come together and we calm down and we start working towards a better future and building it up right here, right now. And we're not going to do that by stealing from each other, hurting each other. Be willing to forgive the people that are below you right now. Be willing to put aside the past and work towards the future, knowing that a vast majority of the country just consign themselves to one side. And that's good. But the people that have been taking advantage of this these last 4 years, the people that have been hurting innocent people these last 4 years, you're being watched. People see you, even if you think that they don't. There are people all throughout the legal system that have been keeping an eye on you. And you better settle down, because there's actually going to be adults in the room soon. When I was younger, I read a book called The Hot Zone, and I did a whole report on it through online school to catch up some credits that I'd have failed, because I would always just wander out of school and walk around. The Hot Zone was about Ebola, and how Ebola came to be. And I had found out way back then, we actually do have Rhesus Monkeys labs in Southeast Africa. Those are ex-German holdings that have been experimenting with cross-transmission bloodborne diseases and creating things like Ebola for like 100 years or so. And that's one of the reasons why, if you have anybody that's like a COVID like terrorist, and they're consistently saying that COVID is the sort of thing that you need to like jump to an exact tune to avoid because it's like the most deadly thing in the world, please share with them the Hot Zone so that they can find out what a real deadly disease looks like and how they come to be. And one other thing about Ebola, it dissolves you so quick it doesn't spread. You literally turn into a puddle, and if nobody steps in that puddle, it doesn't go anywhere and it dies because it kills the host. So if a virus is too bad, it kills the host and doesn't spread. If a virus isn't bad enough, it's not deadly. You have to hit that perfect line in between, and it's very hard to do if you're, experimenting in a lab and then trying to apply it to like all the biomes in the world, all the solar zones in the world, all the different types of like hierarchies to people's specific immune systems that resist this because they've had that in their genealogy for thousands of years, and don't resist that, and that shuffles depending on which person. It's very, very hard to get that right, and I'm really, really not scared of bioweapons labs as much as I am scared of people using bioweapons labs as an excuse to just obliterate 6 billion people and then smile about it because they didn't like them anyways, and they never knew them. They never knew those people. And they would probably like most of them if they did get to know those people. And it's a sad thing about hiding away these days. People can hide away and nurture their bad behaviors, nurture their hatred and pain, and grow it into some very, very strong organism that will bear nasty fruit down the road. It's funny. Ghouls are a thing in the Conan universe. They can tunnel through that theosophical otherworld. They go in between. They tunnel somehow. Ghouls in between. Light world or I guess there's a light world and a dark world, and then there's so it's kind of like a neo conceptualization of heaven and hell. But they can tunnel in between. The dark world that's ruled over that has Midgard, and then it has the Kemetic, scorpion people. So it's basically like a really racist take on, old Roman maps of the Mediterranean, which was the world, and it's also flat because, Nazis say so. But what's funny about the ghouls is the ghouls were first encountered in literature by Islamic merchants. They would apparently get raided by ghouls that would steal their stuff. And I think that's very funny because that allows for a tremendous amount of things that it could be, it could be them passing something off here, or it could just be them getting stuff stolen and then saying, well, it's embarrassing to say that it wasn't some sort of an otherworld entity that didn't disappear out of nowhere, that I was just sleeping. So, yeah, ghouls. A ghoul. Speaking of ghouls, Long Island has a lot of ghouls on it, and if you want to know where the heart, the administrative center of these last 4 years was, it's Long Island. There is no reason why a man with 65 IQ like Dave Rubin, who is married to a man, yet somehow gets Christians to listen to him, and my ex-priest. That's so strange, in my opinion. We got into a big fight because he kept on friendly firing on other Catholics because they didn't toe the exact line that he did. And I found out that instead of, in persona Christe, he really did think that he was the absorber and sole deliberator of Christ's sacrifice. And it says in Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan that all manner of world's religions collapse and can be attributed specifically to bad priests, bad members of the priestly caste. And this man was a bad priest, and I caused a lot of problems in my church by driving him out, but the long term will be better. And I didn't necessarily mean to drive him out. The last word I ever said to him was the wicked flee when none pursueth. And then he got up and ran into a rainstorm. We were having him for lunch at his favorite restaurant, and we had frequently paid for meals for him at his favorite restaurant and given him gifts and given him birthday gifts, and my mom gave him $100 for his birthday, and all he ended up doing was making her very, very sad in the long run. And I hope he gets it together. I really do. Because the damage that he's been doing, he doesn't see it. And then when he does see it, when his life flashes before his eyes without the lies of the ego, and he really sees what he did, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be a misery of absolution. And apparently there's an even worse purgatory for the patriarchs. I don't know about all that, but, maybe that extra responsibility does lead you to falling lower if you sin. Well, that pretty much wraps it up for today. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry if I bummed you out on the last segment, but Hope everybody keeps their head up. Stand tall.